Hi, my name is Timothy Mitchell. I'm with HP Latex. Behind me is the new Latex 800 series printer. I want to take a little time to explain to you what I think are some best practices for loading the material. In order to do that, I'm going to lift up the lid so you can see inside the printer. This is the 800 series. Now the 700 and 800 are a little bit different in the way they're structured. This covers most of it, and then later I'll do a separate little video on the 700. This particular product is spindleless. I have 3-inch cores on it at the moment. If you had a 2-inch core, there's converters to the end pieces, and you can load a 2-inch core. This particular product is an Avery Dennison 2903 adhesive vinyl, gloss adhesive vinyl. I'm going to load it on. It's already onto the spindles, and I have a couple of choices. The first choice is auto load. The second choice is manual load. I think our auto load feature is excellent on this generation of printers. I use it with a great deal of regularity. But there's a couple caveats. On this Avery, the front edge of the vinyl is perfectly straight. It doesn't have any sort of beat up edges. There's no tape on it. And so because of that, I have a high degree of confidence that when I load it in, all I have to do is very gently feed it through. Don't force it. When you feed it through, the machine will sense it automatically, and then it will just slowly creep it forward right to the edge of our new cutter, right to the edge of where the end of the platen is. And then you shut the lid, and then the printer will do all of its own skew alignments and everything else. Because you can load now, seeing everything, you can almost always get your feed perfect. Very easy to do that. But don't push it too hard. You don't have to give it much. And then the printer will automatically sense it and then roll it forward. You'll get the hang of it. It's a real gentle, subtle kind of thing. You don't have to push it. If you choose to do a manual load, that's fine. You'll be doing effectively the same, except instead of the printer pinch rollers kind of pulling the media, you're going to bring it through yourself, and it will go right up to the edge of the platen. Here's some circumstances where I tend to manually load. As I mentioned, the front edge of the material is irregular or kind of beat up. I'll tend to manually load. If there's a smile cut into it, that is, I've cut like a little curve into it to allow it to load a little easier, in those cases, I manually load. If you try to auto load with the curve, it will go back towards the pinch rollers, and you may find that undesirable. You don't want to get edges of, say, adhesive vinyl or static cling to get caught into those pinch rollers. That brings up another subject. Careful with your tape and other things loading the material. I tend to take pieces of tape and whatnot off because you don't want to get pieces of tape stuck into these pinch rollers. That's not something you want to do. So make sure you're giving the printer a smooth, clean, easy to load front edge, and everything will go very smoothly. Sometimes you have to take the front edge and trim a little of that kind of dog-eared, beat-up tape stuck on it. Just cut it away. You don't want to load that through the printer and have it get stuck. If you give the printer a clean edge, like I'm using this Avery, I use the auto load feature all the time. It loads out beautifully. You get a feel for it. It's real consistent. It's real regular. If I'm loading clear, or I've had to cut like a little smile in it, you know, you cut your little curve because it allows it to load into the pinch rollers a little better. In those cases, I manually load. And the manual load is very easy too. Now with the manual load, every once in a while, I bring the material in here, and it sits onto the front of the platen, and then it tries to fall back down again. My solution, I just take a little piece of tape it onto there to hold it, shut the lid, and then once I hit vacuum, then everything will hold down and I can move it forward. When you move it forward, the idea is, when you shut this lid, whether it's an auto load, which will do its own adjustments, if you manually load, it will have you bring the media down past the door, and then what I do is I line it up with the roll so that it's perfectly aligned to the roll. That way I know I have a perfect alignment from the feed roll to where I've rolled out. I hit OK. With the manual load, you have to tell it what your width is. You have to go in there and tell it. With the auto load, it goes and does that itself. One other important thing. When you're loading the material, make sure the edge guards are away from the material. I tend to put the edge guards down on one side completely, or if they're going to be on this side, keep them out of the way. You don't want to be loading under the edge guards. You only apply edge guards with a media if it's absolutely necessary to have that media function on the printer. The edge guards are sort of a last resort. So I do not use edge guards by default. The edge guards may confuse the printer's registration points when it looks at the media, and that may prevent the printer from seeing the width properly. So make sure they are out of the way when you load media. Again, the auto load feature, it will figure out how wide your media is. When you manually load, you will tell it how wide the media is. Loading the printer, very easy to do. Your call on manual or auto. Obviously, the printer will have trouble seeing translucents and clears if you're printing to white ink and things like that. Another note when you load an 800. After it's loaded, please take the lever and tilt it back. Try not to leave it in front. The printer is designed with its rollers and measurements to be in the rear position when it's printing, not in the front position. I frequently forget to do this. And every once in a while, the printer may have some complications in printing because it thinks the distance is this, and in reality, the distance is that. The printing position on the 800 is to lift the lever and then to click it back in place. So that's part of the loading process. Get it loaded in front, lift the lever, drop it in place. Now do your printing. I sometimes don't bring it back because I'm just doing a sheet, a quick sheet. It will print more reliably with less chance of having anything with the feed and the back coming through this curing unit if it's in the rear position. I do recommend that. You can always put the take-up reel on later, but you want this take-up reel in the front position for the 800 series loading. Now, I'm good to go. This would be a perfect media to do an auto load on. The printer will handle everything. Just make sure you drop it in that final position. Make sure when you load it, the edge guards are clear and out of the way, or it could have some trouble figuring out the width of the material. If it does get it wrong, it's okay. Go into the printer panel, go into settings, and just change the width of the roll and make sure that it's correct. For me, almost everything I'm running is either a 54-inch or a 60-inch roll, so it's usually very straightforward. If it's a manual load, then I go in and tell it it's 54 or 60, and the printer will prompt you to do that as you load it. Just a few notes about loading the machine. I think they're fairly self-evident, but I thought I would go through them. And thank you very much for allowing me to explain it to you.